There's been confirmation today in Glastonbury with somebody else connecting with me and giving me a book on somebody's life, and then I knew, because I'm starting to tingle all over now, so that's good. Okay, anyway, over to you, Lee, and I'm going to have some water as well. Is that your water or is that mine?
Well, I began with this one anyway, so bless you.
Over to you, Lee. Leave it all in your very capable hands.
Well, hello everybody. Actually, recognise quite a lot of you from the last time. Bless you for coming back. Amazed I didn't drive you away, but there you go. Really nice to see you. Lots of nice ghosts, lots of ghosts. I like ghosts. I do like ghosts. I do like ghosts, just as well, because I haven't had a lot of choice. As my mother will confirm, from a little boy I've been ghosted, well, so the whole family, so it's family to me, in a strange old way. I won't bore you with why I do these talks. It's a story in itself, other than it's turned out to be my work. It's not how I began, it was a different focus. But it's very much come to me that I have to do this. This isn't just something for fun. There's actually a gigantic underlying reason for what I do. And I hope to do this for the world eventually, not just for a room full of people. And I've just frozen, so thank you. Oh, that was something. Right, now then, the things I'm going to talk to you about are actually a bit fantastic tonight. They're unbelievable. This is going to be a tough one on me because everything I tell you is going to make me more and more incredible, less and less believable, and more into that crank that you know. But I've got to share it with you. It's the only way to give you the truth. I could very easily do a lecture on everything that's been safely written before. I was saying to a lady outside. But what's the point in you coming to that? Anything you can currently get from a book or currently get from a program, God bless you, you've got that already. And I learned that stuff too. That's how I got so far before I went any further. But I'm not going to bore you with what you can learn anywhere else. So it does mean some of my things are a little hard to verify. But not all. Not all. Some have their own evidence, which is rather wonderful. But they are fantastic stories tonight, and they stand a chance of offending people's sensitivities, because they touch on religious overtones. And I don't ever mean to offend anyone's religion, okay? So let's get it clear, these are stories. How much truth is in them is, again, I've made a big point of this first line, explain. The story is for your ghost, it's not for you. Because I think you're going to find it hard to believe the stories, but your ghosts, which are all knowing, or semi-all-knowing as we established last time, will discern truth. And they're listening too. So while you might go away thinking, your ghost may well be quite affected. So I'm really talking to your ghosts, okay? And it's up to you whether you are in touch with your ghost as to whether that will then later mean something to you, change your life in any way, or just be forgotten by tomorrow. But I'm going to talk to your ghosts, all of which you brought with you, thank you very much. And lots of extras as well, I see, thank you very much. Just about enough room in here, I think. Okay, so I'll begin with some things that are a little easy to accept, and we'll warm up from there. One of the sweetest ones around here is the Godney farmer. If anybody's aware of this one, the road going out past the football grounds, heading out to Godney, a lot of straight lines with reens on either side, sort of single traffic roads, very old roads. Going down that road one night, wonderful, well, the Bligh was in, the Glastonbury mist has a name, it's called the Bligh, because it's famous, because things happen in it, magical things happen in the Glastonbury mist, because that's actually a tidal mist, it's the sea, and it's got the mysteries of the sea in it. So during the Bligh one night, I was walking back, feeling particularly eerie, and I don't feel eerie, because I'm happy with ghosts, so I don't generally spook. But I'm going down this road, and I'm not happy at all. I'm really uncomfortable, and it's a long, straight road. But to make me feel a little bit better, there's somebody else coming from the other side, the same long way towards me. So to stay calm, I just keep focusing on this person. I can just about see through the mist. He's coming more and more towards me. He's walking towards me and I'm walking towards him, and he's coming closer and closer towards me, and I can now see him. It's dark, but I can still see a bit of colour, and he's got this wonderful old brown mac on, really old thing with no buttons, and it's tied up with a piece of baler twine, and he's got a pair of huge corduroy trousers and girthy boots that don't fit him down the road, and this lovely old cap with a thumb mark in the middle, and he comes right up alongside me, and I look at him and he looks at me, and my eye looks straight in his eye and he looked straight in my eye, and then he touched his cap like that. He got there, I absolutely froze, knew something was wrong, I turned his flame and gone. It's not there. It's an absolute straight line in another direction with a reed running down each way. There's nowhere he can go. He's gone. And the only reason I bothered to tell you that story is that was an unusual encounter, because normally when you pass a ghost going about its business, it doesn't bother with you. It just continues to go about its business. And it's particularly unusual when they stop and interact with you. And that's exactly what this Godney farmer does, and he's famous for it. He will look you plumb in the eye and go by. And it is the most strange sensation. A gentle, simple little story, but he's there all the time. And you can find him. Find the right night. Go for a little walk. Past the farmer. He's famous. Apparently he fell off his bike drunk one night into the ring or something. Just never got past that point. But he's a very nice guy. He's there. Starting gentle.
He's there.
He's a lovely sort. He's a lovely sort. Eye contact interaction, very unusual. Okay, we're going to up the ante. This can be researched and verified, what I'm about to tell you, but some of it, not all. Anyone heard the name Cancerous Gwillimus? No immediate reaction. Okay, anyone familiar with a famous author of this area called Frederick Bligh Bond? That's better, I knew I'd be in the territory. Okay, Frederick Bligh Bond got his information, the bulk of his information, in secret. When the church found out, they decommissioned him and tried to get rid of his books and all the knowledge he'd learned. They tried to literally destroy it, because they found out where this information had come from. And where it came from is a monk called Cancerous Gwillimus. And there was a pub, I believe it's no longer a pub, I think it was in Benedict Street. And Frederick Bligh Bond and a local gentleman, member of an ancient family that's still here called the Bartletts, the Bartlett family, they're still here. John Bartlett was an automatic writer. And Frederick Bligh Bond was working with him, and he was a researcher on behalf of the church, doing many things, researching the Abbey. And what it transpired, where all this wonderful knowledge that Frederick Bligh Bond kept coming up with, turns out that they were in this room, and this monk would enter, this Cancerous Gwillimus, and Frederick Bligh Bond would put questions to him, and John Bartlett would scribble the answers, frantically scribbling the answers, scribbling. But these scribblings weren't the scribblings, they were remarkable revelations pertaining to the layout of the Abbey, parts of it which were still completely concealed beneath the ground, where certain chapels were, where some secret locations were. But more importantly, he imparted to Bligh Bond and John Bartlett that there was a secret sacred geometry within the Abbey, which was revealed in a book called the Geometria, which you can get. This is what I say, some of this stuff is verifiable. Geometria by Bligh Bond. And it particularly pertains to an arrangement called the vesica piscis, which you must have seen, the twin circles that intersect with an eye. That same symbol is on the Chalice Well, which I'll come back to later, because there's a reason why it's there. Anyway, so Cancerous Gwillimus has been very, very relevant in this town, because a lot of what we know about the Abbey's history we've actually learned from a dead monk. The same when the church found out that's where its information was coming from, they suppressed it. And they tried to disallow it and not accept it. However, a few digs revealed its truth. It's, well, that's a bit embarrassing. But anyway, this Bligh Bond was actually getting his information from a Glastonbury ghost called Chalice Well. And Chalice Well was only once seen, but strangely enough, was seen by the cleaning lady. And the relation of that lady still lives in Glastonbury. It's a very, very ancient lady, bless her heart, won't mention her name, but her mother was the person who met this monk on the stairs. She's cleaning, somebody comes down, she has to stop and get out of the way while this monk goes by. In full medieval monk, she carries on cleaning, they come out, she goes, who was that lovely gentleman? What gentleman? She describes him. They'd never seen him. They'd been channeling him and but the cleaner actually met him on the stairs, which was rather lovely. So I think that was quite sweet that the cleaner was allowed the vision of seeing him. And he, to all intents and purposes, is still here. No reason to assume he's not. Because he's broken the golden rule, which is something I gave in another lecture, which obviously you couldn't have been at, is how long can ghosts stay here having an effect on the planet. There's actually a duration beyond which they seem to just melt down and no longer can have an effect, which is why we don't have very ancient ghosts. Otherwise we'd have Anglo-Saxons and Normans and all sorts getting involved. You know, there is a limit to how long a ghost will stay around effectively. It's probably within 500 years with most ghosts. Some can last longer. It depends on their ministry, how important they were as spirits, whether they're going to reincarnate, whether they have reincarnated. So some can last longer than others. I mean, Chalice Well clearly is a long-lasting ghost. He's already broken the rule and done magnificently. One is to assume he's still there for the right people to be able to plug into, especially now you know his name. You can seek him in the astral. Okay, so Chalice Well. Now we're hotting things up a little bit because he, like I say, he's Frederick by John Bartlett, local family, or writer, yes, vesica piscis. Right. I said to you that I'm going to come back to the Abbey, but that's a big one, so I'm going to return to it. One of the things that this monk, Chalice Well, pointed out was this layout called the vesica piscis, the twin circles and the cross intersecting them. Now this symbol again turns up in Glastonbury. Somebody was affected to create a wellhead lid for the well and put the vesica piscis on it. Whether they realised quite what they were doing, or whether the spirit made them do it, or it was just a happenstance, hard to say. But of all the symbols in all the world, that they should have that on there. But actually, before it was even common knowledge that that was related to the Abbey, which is kind of twisted, you know, how these two can be together. But anyway, it brings our attention to the well. Now, the well. Now we get fascinating. That well, you know, if you've ever been to the Chalice Well Gardens and you get the little story and you get the recording, you know, and it's all Joseph of Arimathea and Holy Grail. That's all beautiful. And I'm not saying that none of that didn't somehow happen in some manifestation, because I'm not going to be that bold or that rude. But what I will tell you is the place is a damn sight older than that. So that is certainly not the beginning of the story, although it may be a continuum within the story. Because that well is one of the strangest buildings in the whole of Great Britain. And when I say building, I mean building. Because back along, I've been here 40 years, I've observed a lot in this area in 40 years. There was a time, I'm not sure when, 20 years or so ago, when it seriously needed repair and the clean out and depoisoning and all the rest of it, because pollute, you know, one thing and another. So they gave it a serious drain. Luckily, I was in the area at the time. And what I was fascinated to have revealed when they emptied this was beyond the wellhead, as you look in, is a 5-sided room, offset to the right. Very peculiar, purpose-built 5-sided room with an offset door. And where you now have the wellhead proper, was originally a sluice gate as well as a wellhead. Further investigation of this building, they sent in modern time historian architects to measure the stones, gaps between the stones and the cut in the stones. And by doing that, they can tell you what era they were built and by what peoples, because as you can imagine, depending on where you're from, the building style changes quite considerably. The cut of the stone, the lay of the stone, shape of the buildings, height of the buildings, all sorts of things vary. When they measured this five-sided room, which is beneath the well, and they did the math, and they looked for a comparison, there was only one comparison to the building style of that well anywhere that's known on the planet. And that place is the Great Pyramid in Egypt. Again, I've just gone goosebumps. It's got the same masons built that built the Great Pyramid. And the same architects. Same cut, same lay, same style. It is Egyptian in origin. Now this gets very deep, because we're going back, what, 3,500, 4,000 years. Nobody knows for certain the exact date of the building of the Great Pyramid, but let's say 3,500 to 4,000 years. Now, 3,500 to 4,000 years ago, a few things were different. Travel was incredibly precarious, especially if that travel involved crossing seas. And of all the races in all the world, the Egyptians hated the sea. They never really did get off on the sea. But luckily for them, right next to them were a race called the Phoenicians, who really got on well with the sea. So they didn't deal with them. They said, look, we're going to conquer everybody and force our way on. If you accept our rulership, you can go on living entirely as you are now. But you've got to do one thing for us. You've got to be our navy. Deal. Phoenicians enjoyed a beautiful, uninterrupted life, protected by their Egyptian overseers, while they were allowed to remain themselves with their own gods, their own style, their own everything. But, on occasion, they served the Egyptians with their ships. This is how Egyptians got things in from other places without needing to travel the seas themselves. The Phoenicians largely did it for them. A piece of history not well known that, but it's actually a fact. Anyway, I digress. Let me go back. This thing was built by Egyptians here in the heart of Glastonbury. Now, two things, well, as I said, one, travel, it was totally precarious. So it's no small undertaking to send a party from Egypt to the middle of England. No small undertaking. The other thing was, you're talking about an England that was a forest full of extremely wild, unpredictable beings. That's to say the least. Not to mention some wild animals and the like, which were still around at the time. Lions and all sorts. It was a precarious place. And for the Egyptians to have to suffer this journey and then this danger in unknown lands, in a place they believed was ruled entirely by ghosts, England, that they had its name for it like many did, was a terrifying but required undertaking for them. And it happened on an annual basis. Now, for how long this was kept up, when it began, and how long it kept up, can't tell you. Do know that it ran into the period of the Great Pyramid, hence the building of it. So they not only came all this way to go out of their way to build this building in the middle of what appeared to be nowhere to them, but yearly they would have to go through this over and over again, this entourage coming all the way to this place to perform the strangest of ceremonies. A very strange ceremony. It was a voluntary sacrifice ceremony. And it was conducted mainly by women. Magnificent ceremony, processed in white during May Day, because hawthorn flowers were required. When I say May Day is based actually on the first hawthorn flowers being on the trees. It wasn't a fixed date, it was when the flower appeared. When the flower appeared, that was the time for May Day type celebrations, as they were in the old days. Now, back in Egyptian times, that related to ghosts and spirits. So they would get here in time for May Day, or thereabouts, Then this procession, I don't know where it came from, but I know where it ended up, and it ended up at the well head. And it was a procession of mainly women, entirely in white, chanting, a few officers, maybe sort of pharaoh representatives there. Maybe even young pharaohs to be had to come to be initiated there. I don't know. That's a possibility. What is for sure is they would get here, and then they would undergo a changing of the self, an opening of the spirit, and they would do so by imbibing the apples of Hercules, was cider. And they would drink this cider, and it would get them into the right spiritual state. Now, one being, the chosen one, or the volunteer one, or the raised to do it one, or all three, whichever, because sometimes these people raised from birth to be a sacrifice. When it was that person's time, that person was given extra apples of Hercules. Lots of cider. Lots of cider. And they were placed on a throne beneath the sluice gate. The procession would get wilder and wilder, the singing, the chanting, maybe an odd horn, an odd drum. Sacred words were being chanted. At the same time all this is going on, these hawthorn flowers, which are all in baskets, are being thrown like snow. So the air is full of white, and it's raining like snow-white flowers all over the place, and especially all over the person in the throne. At that exact height moment, the sluice gate was opened, and the volunteer was drowned. It wasn't too terrible, they were very drunk, it happened quickly. Okay? It wasn't such a terrible trauma. Still more than I'd go through, but, you know. Did this happen once? Did it happen twice? No, this happened again, and again, and again, and again, and again, and again. So what you have at Chalice Well, like I say, never mind the Christian story, that may have credit too. But what you definitely have is the most unbelievable storehouse in one 5-sided room and the throne area of a multiple Egyptian ghost, a super ghost, a combo ghost of equally enacted volunteers becoming a part upon a part upon a part upon a part, until you have a super battery of psychic potential, ghost potential, Egyptian potential, a massive storehouse of Egyptian flavour, Egyptian style, Egyptian power, Egyptian understanding. And this was just not just put there for fun, because as I said, this was a phenomenal undertaking. This was deadly serious. And these beings, God bless them, or whatever, bless them, had the courage to do this, to know that what they were doing wouldn't even happen in any short space of time. Millennia would have to pass before they would be required. But they have been there, and they are waiting patiently. And they are there, waiting patiently. But are they waiting patiently? No, they're not. They're trying very hard to get out of the moment. And why are they trying hard to get out of the moment? Because the time is now. And the reason that they were all there was for this age now, for this point in time now. Why now? Because exactly now, Zion, as was 2,000 years ago, Jerusalem, has had a 30-degree shift to the west, which places it in the southwest of England, lying over what we call Avalon, which is why some people call Glastonbury the New Jerusalem or the New Zion. They're not actually wrong. Although to call it Jerusalem is to tag it with a title that's no longer relevant. Because Jerusalem was Jerusalem when it was Jerusalem's time, Glastonbury will be Glastonbury when it's Glastonbury's time. Before Jerusalem was Persia, before that. And what happens is that this paradigm shift, every 2,000 years, 30 degrees, angled off to the west. So if you want to go back, keep going back in levels of 2,000 years, go 30 degrees each time, you'll find where the Jerusalem point was on the earth at any time in history. You can wind it back, but you can also wind it forward. And funnily enough, 2,000 years from now, it'll land in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. the rising of Atlantis. But that's the next one. Right now, it's landing on Avalon. How much of a coincidence is it? It isn't a coincidence. Not only are the Christians, certain sections of them saying that this is the New Jerusalem and expecting a second coming to go with it, but many other religions feel the same way, albeit calling it a different thing and giving it a different flavour. To the Egyptians that put their beings there nearly 4,000 years ago, 2 paradigm shifts ago, the time is now for them here, but to them, it's not the second coming of Jesus. This is, as in Revelations, the rising again of Egypt. And if you check out Revelations, you will find Egypt will rise. That is part of Revelations. Egypt will rise. But when they say Egypt will rise, do they mean Egypt the land? No. The essence, that is Egypt, will rise. It doesn't need to rise in the physical crumbled body of the original Egypt. It rises in the new chakra point for the planet, the new Zion, the new Jerusalem. And do you know, there's a coincidence here, but it's no coincidence, because there is no coincidence, that one of the secret names for Glastonbury is Little Egypt. Okay? So Egypt rising in Glastonbury coincides beautifully with the New Jerusalem concept. There is no problem with it. We're all on the same page. These charged Egyptian beings there will have no more of a problem with whatever master they want to serve than will the Christians, provided we understand that it's emitting from the same powerhead and has the same agenda for the planet. You know, to me, this is the beginning of the coming together of all religions, is that when they realise they're all focusing in one place, waiting for one being, that they're just giving it different names. But it is being even born out in the spirit world, not just in books and in people's imagination. It is being born out in the spirit world. So we're starting to get really hotted up here that this Chalice Well, incidentally, before I leave it, when you go there again in the future, if you go there, I'm trying to remember what I said, and go to that wellhead and try and be Egyptian, try and empathise with what's in there. You might be amazed with what tries to come back. Because it may well, excuse me, I jumbled my words, may well be waiting for one of you to come and be the host for one of them. It's very possible. You know, when we're lured to these places, sometimes it's because something's waiting for us. And sometimes it leaves with us. So there may be one for each of you. I don't know. But they're certainly ready to come out. And there's a job keeping them in right now. They're very active. It's a highly active place. Far from dead. Far from dead. But interestingly charged. But say, any questions? Anyone freaking, please feel free.
It's a great pyramid on one of the chakra points for planet Earth. Because Glastonbury is supposed to be, isn't it? When it's, you go back 4,000 years, if there's a link there between the 2 chakra points that brought the Phoenician Egyptians from there to Glastonbury.
Chakra point, yes, but not a Jerusalem chakra point.
No, okay.
The whole world, you know this already, the world has got a circuit of chakra points, all linked originally. But at any given time, certain ones are raised to be poignant and more emitting. It's like you hear people say the heart chakra of the world. There's always a heart chakra of the world, but it moves. It moves with the age. The head chakra of the world moves with the ages. So the chakras actually shift. Some chakras which were ordinary chakras for millennium suddenly become the most important one for a couple of thousand years. Or one of. And then we'll just go back to being ordinary again. And these shifts can fire up in different places. Now, the Great Pyramid I don't think was ever the New Jerusalem point. But it is one of the organs that is absolutely vital. So vital, if I had to guess, and I don't generally do this, which part it relates to, i.e. heart, brain, whatever. Do you remember me saying in my last talk about the sacrum where the ghost lives?
Yeah.
Well, I would imagine it to be the sacrum. It's a guess, but it's an educated guess, okay? It's funny enough, even the same shape, it's a triangle. Also, the Great Pyramid, great question by the way, thank you. No, because it's so relevant, because the Great Pyramid is a place for doing a special, it is called the Great Horus superimposition. I don't know if you've heard this, but the idea is you have the sarcophagi, you have a king of Egypt, not yet pharaoh, but king. To become king, he is taken to the Great Pyramid. Part of this is known, part is supposed, okay? Taken to the Great Pyramid. Inside the Great Pyramid, as you know, there was this wonderful chocolate quartz sarcophagi, which they doubted had ever actually held a dead body. Good reason. The living king, or queen, would be taken and placed in the sarcophagi. A high priest of great power would then place this king stroke queen in a state of sort of animated suspension, a near-death experience. They would essentially kill them, but leave them with just a spark of life left running the body, taking away the intention, which is your ghost, your thoughts, your dreams, your aspirations. They take that human attention away, they just turn that off to the point where the body's ticking over and the great spirit which maintained you is still around. And then, having reduced you to that point, they then summon Horus. And Horus is summoned in this great ceremony, and Horus is encouraged to enter the body of the king stroke queen. Once the Horus has entered the body and superimposed itself upon the king stroke queen, then that being has had the full Horus superimposition. And at that point, being both Horus and king, he's no longer king, he's now pharaoh. And this is how you go from king to pharaoh. Because pharaoh means to carry the spirit, the great spirits. In our case it would be Jesus, to the Egyptians it was Horus. Interestingly, so it was such an important question that man asked, I'm so glad he did. Jesus, when he disappeared from Israel, or when it wasn't wise to hang around because Herod was killing all the babies and all that stuff, and he disappeared for 12 years or so. We know he went to Egypt for his education. He would have been taught incredible things. He would have been taught to be a scribe, definite, which means Jesus could read and write, which means where's the Jesus scrolls? If you were the most important man around with the most important message and you'd learned to read and write, wouldn't you write it yourself? Would you leave it to someone else? Somewhere is Jesus' own writing. That would be incredible. So he was not only a scribe, he was educated in the full workings of religious hierarchy, law, ritual ceremony, especially things like the Horus superimposition ceremony, etc., etc. And it would have culminated, because they, make no mistake, the Egyptians knew who he was. It's a bit like they'd found themselves the lady with the dragons, you know, well, we've got him, you know, we'll raise him, we'll make him one of ours. And they knew who he was, and there's a very, very strong possibility that they put him through the full Horus superimposition, because they recognized him at that high a level. Which would, they would have done that, not so much that they wanted him as their pharaoh, but as a final turning of a key, of a raising of him to open him to the highest spirits that were available to enter. So it's very likely that Jesus incurred some part of that ceremony, if not the whole of it, and may well himself have walked around thinking, well, I've got Horus in me. But funnily enough, like the sort of freaks of today walk around thinking, well, I've got Jesus in me. He would have thought, oh, I've got Horus in me. Whatever, you know, why not? But that is so poignant, yes. And the well is almost like a mimic of that. And bear in mind, it was the same masons. The very same masons. So that was a very important question. Thank you. I'm glad you asked that. It's thrown me one, but here we are.
Sorry to interrupt you again. Can I ask another question?
Yes, do.
In the country of Avalon,
Yeah.
the information that was given was about 2 pyramids in Glastonbury Abbey.
Correct, they're in my book as well. One had St. Patrick buried underneath it, the other had Joseph of Arimathea.
Right. So is there any connection with the Egyptian?
Utterly.
Yeah.
Yes, utterly. Again, good question, thank you. It's there, I was getting to it. They don't like you asking that question. Nobody liked you asking that question. They don't want to talk about it. You try finding what happened to those pyramids. Nobody will tell you. They stuck out like a sore thumb. They did not belong. And underneath them was the most powerful people we could have possibly put there.
How do you know they were there? Sorry.
Because they were still there in recorded history time. They were excavated. That's how they found the bones of Patrick, which is now he's now reinterred somewhere else. But he was known to have been brought back here. He didn't die here. He was the first abbot of Glastonbury. He was called Abe Patrick, and he used to live in a building at Beckery, which was originally St. Bridget's building. Was enlarged, and a guy called Patrick and a few, I'm going to call them monks, but sort of that kind of thing, lived there, knew of the Church of Jesus, wanted to build around it, wanted to increase its size, create an abbey, so they made their leader at the time, a guy called Patrick, the first abbot, they called him Abe Patrick. He left after a short period of time, went off to Ireland, became famous, did all the things he did. But when he died, he was brought back and he was very carefully put back here. And he also had an apprentice called Benedict, of which St. Benedict's is dedicated to. That was the apprentice of Patrick. Which is again relevant to the whole story, really. The odd thing is, if you look up the annals of all the abbots of Glastonbury, they start with number 2 and they leave Patrick out. The very founder of it all is not on the list. Because something's weird about all of that. Like I said, when he was dead and they brought him back, they put him under a pyramid. So, a little bit of an odd one, that, the Patrick thing. You know, again, I find that story fascinating because he went off and conquered the Irish and then they made him their national hero. It's like, what a strange thing to do. Doesn't make sense somehow. But anyway, I'm not going into that one, I'll get shot. Massive goes, rising power, flare revealed. Oh yes, incidentally, talking of the Egypt. You know the word Exodus? The 40,000 that were released from the Pharaoh and went to live in the desert, blah, 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 blah. Well, it was interesting that they should call that the Exodus, because the actual meaning of the word Exodus means to leave the way. And it doesn't seem to sort of go with the story of them fleeing some kind of persecution. To then call that the leaving of the way, that's almost like, well, that's, to say to leave the way is like to say to leave behind what they really wanted to do. Like the opposite of what we're told. And interestingly, there is a new word for this age. It's called Hodos, and it means return to the way. So try to remember the word Hodos. It's a beautiful word. Return to the way. It's going to be part of the whole Egypt Christian thing coming together. It's beautiful. Beautiful word. Hodos, have it written here. Just thought I'd get that in while we were touching on Egypt. Culmination of old ritual. Yes, this business in the well. I believe that not only is it pertaining to a rising of Egyptian thinking, flavour, style, versions, interpretations, and as much as, and this is certainly becoming popular. It's certainly one of the more popular things. People claiming to be from Egypt, like they claim to be Arthurian, or they claim to be Jesus. You know, it's a big thing to claim to be from Egypt. People want it. It's like in their hearts. It's in their souls. And a lot of you, I believe, were Egyptians anyway at some point. A lot of the super beings on the planet, the teachers, were. Egypt went on for so long. It was a wonderful place to educate super spirits. Because it just went on for so long. It was incredible how long that lasted. And how long it was a working relationship as well, you know. And so it doesn't die easily. And I wonder if not only is it lending assistance to what's happening in the New Age, call it the Second Coming, call it what you like, but I wonder, and I put it here possible, are one or more of the pharaohs reincarnating again? Because I think that's what's going on. I think we're going to get a kind of a pharaohic kind of a Messiah on our hands if we're up for it. I'm not sure, but it's a strong possibility, and that wouldn't be so terrible, believe me, it wouldn't. They were very understanding people. So yeah, I've put possible support and succour already in place. Definitely, whatever that charging of the area was done by the Egyptians, albeit we're the ones fortunate enough to be milking it. But it would have to suit us. So there would have to be some part of us that is empathic to the Egyptian way. So, you know, here we are, and we are right on top of it as it's happening, and it's happening right now. So it's quite fascinating, really. Like, this is going to get even hotter now. This is where it starts getting really unbelievable. And this is more poignancy of how the time is now. If we'd have had longer, I'd have let you have a break between these two things. But I'm going to have to just plough on. But you bear with me while I have some water. Because this
A short break, Lee, if you want. You can have a 5-minute break, darling.
No, I'm all right. Well, I could say talk among yourselves. A bit of a joke, really, isn't it?
I have to let you know that a lot of what you've been talking about, people have been feeling into me while you've been talking about them.
Yeah. Well, like I say, I hope not to offend or cause anybody's anger, because these are only...
Because that's what all the North African coastline uprisings have all been about. They started in Egypt back in the beginning of last year.
Yeah.
And it's a sort of the rising up of the people against like a dictatorial king, as opposed, without the, what did you call it, pharaonic?
That's correct. You're a very wise man, sir. I'll talk to you later. Yes, you're very correct. Oh gosh, I was going to say something and it slipped away from my mind what I was about to say. Oh, remind me again what you just said. My brain's gone dead. What was the last thing you said? You know this happens to me.
About the uprising in Egypt.
Uprising in Egypt, thank you. It's an illness I have. I suddenly can't remember what I'm talking about. It's genuine. I have to ask. I'm lost. And then I'm back again. It happens when you're a ghost. Not only is that gentleman correct about the strange things going on in Egypt, do you know that Egypt's not called Egypt anymore? Hasn't been for some time. The part of this change and the rise went right at the highest political level, and Egypt got renamed Macht, M-A-A-T, with the 2 full stops above the A's, and that is the goddess of truth, and they have renamed their country Truth. And that is the correct name for Egypt now, is Macht. Which is rather sweet, isn't it? But it's actually relevant because the truth will have to battle its way out. And yes, there is problems. There has been, there will be, but they're not unresolvable. It's all good, believe me. Okay, here's the other power place we live right by, Glastonbury Abbey. Oh my goodness me. Goodness me. I will quickly touch over how it came to be here, because again the stories they tell, they prefer to give a bent version. Again, they don't like you to delve too deep. When Joseph of Arimathea was quite young, he used to do a lot of metal trading in Europe, particularly in the British Isles for silver, tin and lead. Silver, he would go to Scilly, to what was called the Secret Tin Isles then, and they were the Fort Knox of the world for silver back then. The bulk of the world's silver store was hidden on the Scilly Isles. And it was the Secret Tin Isles. And only those who needed to trade tin knew of it. Silver, I beg your pardon. Secret silver, Secret Tin Isles. Tin and silver, but silver in particular was stored there. Anyway, Joseph of Arimathea was here trading. He so-called brought with him his young nephew, roughly 12-year-old Jesus at the time. Several records of him landing in St. Just and St. Agnes and here and there and what have you. But more to the point, while Joseph was trading here up at places like Greenall and stuff like that for the lead and the copper, Jesus met the local Druids. Local Druids and him, instead of being at loggerheads, they got on like a house on fire. Druids related to him straight away and taught him very quickly a very important set of sacred geometrical formulas, particularly to do with circles, to do with Stonehenge and the layout and why and the spacings. And he took this on very, very fast because he was a great scholar. And he mimicked what he had been taught by the Druids and built this semicircular, semispherical, I beg your pardon, wattle and daub structure, later to be called a church because Jesus built it, but it was a structure in this semispherical manner. This structure was 27 paces across, etc., etc., etc. I have the dimensions at home, and it's a scaled down Stonehenge. Okay. Now, this was later learned about by a couple of... No, let's get it in the right order. After Jesus died, Joseph of Arimathea imparted to his son, who was then commonly known to the world as Joseph of Arimathea, because it's a title that goes from father to son. So the young Joseph of Arimathea sets off, goes to France to see a guy called Philip of Gaul. Philip of Gaul was a sort of French, almost Jesus, a real powerful being, worth studying, fascinating, Philip of Gaul. Joseph of Arimathea went to see him with some special knowledge, told him of this wattle and daub church. Philip of Gaul lent him 12 of his own disciples. So Joseph of Arimathea brought them to England. They found the place where Jesus had built this little structure. It was still there. So they built a series of, another circle around it, divided into 12 cells around it. They were then given by the local king, called Arviragus, who looked in to see what was going on, liked it, liked the sound of it. He donated a hide of land to each of the 12. The 12 hides of land became Avalon, the 12 hides of Glastonbury. And they were donated for perpetuity by King Arviragus forever. This belongs to the church. Although it's until the 21st century when they just forgot the whole thing had ever happened, and it all belongs to England again now. Conveniently. But it's a fact that for a long time the 12 hides of Glastonbury were exempt from British taxes, British changes of law and everything. They only obeyed the church. And it was a separate hide of land, a separate country within a country. And it was never not that. They'd just like you to believe that had changed. This is actually a separate country, these 12 hides. So there you go. Right, moving on. They eventually die, they're all eventually buried there. Time goes by, this gets forgotten. Hundreds of years pass till two Irishmen called Faganus and Jeruvianus came wandering around here like missionaries and found this building, this wattle and daub church, remnants of it, although had wild animals in it at the time, but it was still completely intact, and it shouldn't have been. Hundreds of years had passed. Why was it completely intact? Because the Druids, who gave Jesus the dimensions to make it in the first place, so appreciated it and recognised it that they had taken it over after Jesus and had used it for a Druid university for hundreds of years, and had maintained it and kept it, and it was one of their chief universities that they had, was here. So Faganus and Druvianus find a university, albeit they find a hut with animals in it, but it's a Druid university. They build it up, it becomes a church. Later they decide this is so sacred we've got to turn it to an abbey. This is how the abbey grounds grew around it. Now all of this was too interesting by half for the average layman, and they didn't want people digging and wrecking, and so the story is told that Joseph of Arimathea built this church and everything, and that is so nearly true that we'll allow the benefit of it. But to those who were in the know, Joseph didn't build it, Jesus built it. Joseph maintained it afterwards. And I have to say that I'm finally borne out with this. If you go in the abbey now, there's now a new plaque by the door admitting that Jesus built the church and contradicting the pamphlets. And I'm delighted that they've changed that. I'm delighted they're telling the truth. This makes it the holiest place on earth. It's the only church Jesus ever built. And this is another reason they wanted it a secret. If it had been obvious it was Jesus' church, you'd be living in the biggest city in England now. You'd be in the equivalent of an English Mecca. And for some reason it needed to be kept quiet, secret, played down. This place needed to be run right down to a near stop. So the lies perpetuate to keep the secret, to keep it safe, to keep it small, to keep the spirits uninvaded by 30-mile wide cities, and for the abbey to still be there. Now, how important is the abbey? How flipping important? Well, to those who really know, there is no more important place. So it starts getting filled with the most important people on the planet. And if you start looking at who's buried there, there's king after king, there is saint after saint, there is the disciples of Philip the Gaul, there is Joseph of Arimathea himself buried at the abbey. Patrick, the weird one, the super one, the unknown quantity, if you like. Debated even, potentially, Mary Magdalene, and that would be the best kept secret of all. Because Mary, when Joseph of Arimathea and the 12 disciples were living, well, the 12 disciples had to live out there for the rest of their lives, okay? Mary Magdalene, who was well-to-do, visited them, they reckoned, roughly once a year, with money and supplies. And she kept them maintained throughout her life, till they'd all gone, or she went, or whatever, whoever went in what order. But so much was she related to the prosperity and the continuum of that building that to this day she is called Our Lady of Glastonbury. And for those in the know, it was because it was her beneficiary that made it all possible. She kept it maintained and going. Now, she wouldn't have done that lightly either, you know, nor would Joseph of Arimathea, nor would these disciples. All of these things are not done on a whim or a new age quest of the time. They are the greatest, you know, people's whole lives are changed forever by making these moves. So this is no small thing. So okay, you've got all these kings there. I once knew the list, but Ina, Canute, somebody the great, there's somebody not so great. But you've got saints like Vincent, Apollinaris, Patrick himself, certain abbots that were sort of sainted later, but I don't agree with that, but that's another thing. But you've got these saints, you've got kings, you've got them all in the crypt that was built later underneath the church that Jesus built. And incidentally, what have they bothered to call the church that Jesus built? They call it the Vetusta Ecclesia, the Lady Chapel, dedicated to Mary Magdalene. See, it all ties in. If you look, it's all there. And underneath it, there's all these kings and saints. But more to the point, more than the kings and the saints, the most powerful beings of all, to me, are, for instance, Joseph of Arimathea. As I say, potentially Mary Magdalene. But let's just do Joseph of Arimathea, shall we? I said my story is going to get too fantastic to believe. Well, here's the first one, a little baby one. It really happened, you won't believe it, but it happened. When I was young, 1,000 years ago, when I was young, I was very cheeky and mischievous. It was a wanting to know. I was a cheeky, mischievous, want-to-know boy. I went places I perhaps shouldn't have been. I never did any harm. I just had to know. And I was frequently in the Abbey in the middle of the night. I was always there. It was just one of those things. I couldn't help it. One particular very freezing night, I had no intention of going there at all. I'm on my way home. It's a terrible winter's night. There's a gorgeous moon, this crisp moon, frost everywhere, low freezing mist, really cold night. I'm walking past it and suddenly I just know I've got to go and I thought, oh no, it's cold. And, oh, I don't go now. Somebody was just saying, you're coming in tonight, boy. Oh, okay, a little boy. And I go, oh, this is cold. Interesting, you know, it's all shiny and misty and crisp and there's only me and it's all sparkly. And I thought, well, it's sort of perfect spirit night, really, isn't it? Spirits like this sort of thing, don't they? So I went to the part of the building that joins the Abbey to the original church, a little joiny bit. I can't remember what they call it, the joiny bit. And I had no idea what I was about to do, other than I was going to do something a bit cheeky and a bit mischievous, like call up one of those big names and see what happens. But why else would I have been there? You know, I was on my way home otherwise, you know. So I go in and I thought, right, I'm going to try something I've never tried before. And I called up, I can't remember the precise words, a bit naff anyway, but I called up Joseph of Arimathea. Let's see what happens. I hardly got it out my mouth before my attention was snapped to the left, at the very far corner of the site. And I'm not even sure what made me look there, but I knew something wasn't right. And I looked, and as I looked, the light seemed to keep not being right. And something was going in a line across the lawn. And the more I looked, the more I thought, it's like the wind's in a tube. And there seemed to be this sort of rolling glass tube coming across the field. And it was perfect, and it was just like rolling light, and it was just bending the light as it went. It went all the way along the field, and then it turned left and it started coming straight towards me. And I was initially really pleased, and then not so pleased as it came closer and closer and closer. And then suddenly it was bearing straight on, and it picked up terrific speed. It rushed straight at me. It hit me. It was about that wide. It was a perfect tube of bent light. It's like glass, but without the glass there, but behaving like glass. And it rushed straight at me, hit me, wrapped round me, and this, I told you, you won't believe it, I started going up in the air. And I've not ever been lifted off the ground before, and it was an extremely disconcerting experience. And I went up very quickly at about this speed. Suddenly I'm at least 3 feet off the ground, which is a hell of a long way when there's nothing underneath you. And I'm in thin air and I'm still going up. And this has all taken about 1.5 seconds and I'm off into the sky, up this tube. And I let out one almighty word. I just went, Jesus! I've got it written there, the stop word, Jesus! And as I finished saying Jesus, I was just dropped, straight back on the ground again. Blah! Collapsed, freaked right out. I was like, and I couldn't fathom it. I thought Jesus and Joseph and Matthew were on the same side. What happened there? What was that about? Why did I get sucked off into the sky just for asking for Joseph and Matthew? And that made me fascinated to know what was right or wrong with Joseph of Arimathea that I had done such a folly. I was so shocked that that should result in me being like snatched up. And I said, hard to believe. I tell you, it happened. I wouldn't ruin my own credibility by saying such a thing unless it really did. It happened. So for us, let's say you've got Joseph of Arimathea, or something answering his name, that is incredibly powerful and active in that abbey. If you want to dabble with it, that's up to you. I'm not doing it again. But it really did have that effect, and it's visually and magically the most power I've ever seen a ghost have. It was unreal. So it not only played with light, it took me clean off the ground. Like I was nothing. Just nothing. And that was all just for openness. Because that was Joseph of Arimathea. I moved on. It was actually a different night. But fascinated by all of this, a short time later I returned. Now, the story I'm going to tell you gets even more incredible than the last one. Quickly, I apologise for talking about me. The only way I can tell this story is because I was there, which is why I know it's true. And as I said to somebody before I came in, I would rather share with you something I know is a true story than something I read in a book and I can only hope. This happened while I was there, and I'm sharing it first hand with you. Don't claim to know what happened, I just claim to know what did happen, if you know what I mean. Okay. Identical circumstances, same winter, whether it was the same month, but it was the same winter. An identical night. Another good moon, crisp night, this strange low ankle-high mist, you know, the one that never gets more than a couple of inches, hugs the ground. And sparkly, everything sparkling in crystals. Most beautiful night. Poignant that there was a hard frost, and this is poignant because this is what was wrong with where I went next. I am lured this time to walk up through the abbey. And I walk through the abbey towards what I call the Holy of Holies. It's its correct name. It's a point just beyond the cross section where the most sacred relic of a church is stored, or a sacred body or whatever. It's the power point, if you like, from an energy point of view of the church, is the Holy of Holies. So I made my way to the Holy of Holies, where, and this is the other two ghosts I hadn't bothered to mention yet, two other beings claim to have been buried in the abbey are Arthur and Guinevere, okay? We all know this. We also know that we're led to discard that based on the grounds that when they were discovered the church was particularly broken, wasn't it convenient that they were found right then? And there's this wonderful dispelling story just to make a mockery of it all, which I find the world's most perfect red herring, and also typical of Spirit to go and set something up to read like a B movie so that you can't believe it. This is often the way of Spirit, it makes things seem incredible. But anyway, there they are, maybe Arthur and Guinevere, maybe. So, and where are they found? Under the third pyramid, because there was actually three. They're moved to, of all the places in the whole church, out of all those beings they can pick from, the kings, the saints, the disciples, Mary, who do they put in the Holy of Holies? But Mary, Arthur and Guinevere. Okay? Whether it was there or not, that's where they were put. So I'm lured to this point. And I'm headed for it. Like I said, there was that low mist, but it had risen just a bit, and it was kind of like knee height now, playing about a bit. And as I walked towards the patch of grass that's in a perfect square, as you know, with the sign at the back, King Arthur lies here, buried, whatever, blah. A few things were wrong as I got there. The sign, which is actually at the back, was at the front. Although at the time I hadn't realised that that was wrong. I ought to know because I've been in there hundreds of times. but the sign was in the wrong position, it was at the wrong side of the grave. It was a small, simple thing, but there it was. Another thing, as I'm coming towards it, straight out of a terrible B movie that you'd never believe, all the mist is wrapping around the whole sign, and all you could see are the words King Arthur. It was gorgeous. It was terribly naff, but it was totally real. And there it is, King Arthur in the mist. Oh, I like it. So I got there. And I stopped and I looked down. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. Remember I said that everything was frostbitten and everything was locked in ice and crystals? There's the square within the stones that's supposed to be the ground where they had this sarcophagi. And corner to corner was the most beautifully tilled soil I have seen in years. So beautifully tilled it made me get down on my knees and have a look at it, because there's something about it that looked amazing. And every little bit of soil was a perfect sphere. Some big, some middle sized, some baby. But every bit of soil was a sphere. And every bit of soil was wet. And the result was tens of thousands of soil spheres of all different sizes making up the soil in this thing. But I was fascinated by this. I didn't realise soil was circular all the time, you know, if you leave it undisturbed. How have I not noticed this before? I was absolutely fascinated. And I was down there, as I said, looking at it, and then I could hear something. I could hear this noise. What's that? And it was the soil, and it was making all these watery noises, squeaks and rolls and stuff. And I'm looking at it, and one of these balls goes, and then another one of these balls goes. And that's what these noises were, these little balls are rolling. And I suddenly thought, uh-oh, this isn't right. I mean, I should have realised there was far more than that wrong. Everything else is locked in frost and ice, and this is wet circles of soil rolling about like it's a warm day. I should have already known something was severely wrong. But I did decide, no, that isn't right. I wonder what's going on there. And I sort of got up, and I started feeling incredibly scared. And like I said, I don't feel scared, I seek out ghosts. But I started feeling ridiculously scared. So scared I couldn't turn around quick enough. And as I turned around, I thought, I'm out of here. But there were stupid thoughts going in my head. I can't run in church. It's stupid, but these are the sort of things that you think. You know, all I want is to get the hell out of there. I think, I can't run. So I turned around and I did a Monty Python, and I took the giantest step you've ever seen, followed by the second giantest step you've ever seen, followed by the third giantest step. In the space of 3 steps, I've probably covered nearly 12 feet. You know, I'm out of there. And as I landed the third giant runaway step, suddenly I am hit from behind. Boom! And it didn't actually knock me to the ground, but it knocked me forward. And what came over me was warm, wet, thin jelly. A wave of wet, body temperature jelly. Just boom! And I felt it run down every fibre of my body. And I felt the weight of the wave hit me. I felt it hit me as a wave. And this wave just rolled down me. The strangest thing, I was filled to the brim with fear as it hit me. And as it rolled down each bit of me, that bit went from fear to super euphoria. So and as it ended, I was just the most elated I've ever been in my life. It was just an incredible sense of elation, an incredible sense of being over tall and all sorts of weird things. I felt like I had an overcoat on and I couldn't put my arms by my sides anymore. It was too big. So I sort of walked out of there like I'd proved myself or something. Kind of weird, really. Time to go home now. I went home, I was to then have revelations. But the thing is, I want to make clear here, I don't know what came out of that hole. I didn't look. I was facing the other way. And I'm not beginning to say to you for a millisecond that it was Arthur or Guinevere or any of that. What I am saying is that something emitted from the Holy of Holies, that position in the church, where there just happened to be that sign. However, as I say, the sign was playing with the game as well. But something came out of there and got me. And it did get me. There was no doubt about it, it got me. It was all over as fast as it hit me, except this sense.
Did that stay with you?
So much so that I didn't go out for a couple of days because, I'll be honest, I couldn't stop crying. I didn't understand what was going on. I felt, the lady I was with at the time was horrified by the results. I couldn't get up off all fours. I felt too tall. I felt wrong for the planet. I felt wrong about everything. I'd get out of bed and I'd get on all fours like a nervous cat, and I was moving around, crawling, too scared to get out. I just kept crying. It was the strangest thing. And this sense of having an overcoat that I couldn't relax under. And it took quite a while to wear off. And it also had an effect on my mind. But when I tried to sleep, I had the most agoraphobic sensations of my life. I saw my own brain the size of a moon, a big black ball, and the knowledge and me was a grain rolling about in the bottom. And it just kept giving me this vision of me as a grain in a giant black empty planet, which was my own brain. I almost went crazy.
So it's something evil then?
No. Kind of a rearrangement going on. Because I needed to be like that for a few days until it felt normal. Because that was the next thing. I then had a revelation, which was magnificent, which changed my whole life. And led me being the bearer of something so incredible that I'm still waiting to share it with the world. These are incredible stories. I'm risking complete crankability by sharing them with you, but it did happen, and I would not lie about it. It did happen. I was then led to... Have I got much time left, Jill?
10 minutes.
Okay, 10 minutes. All right, then I'll use those 10 minutes very importantly. Yes, I had a revelation. I don't know how, but somebody had got a copy to me of a book. For God's sake, get it. It is called The Gospel of Philip the Deacon. Okay? Hard to get. If you can get a hardback copy, God bless you, they're very valuable. Not money, but spiritually. They have so much power, I can't believe it. I was reading this book, The Gospel of Philip the Deacon. Incidentally, who is Philip the Deacon, I will tell you. In Jesus' time, when he walked with his 12 disciples, there was another character called Philip, who was a Greek, who was a scholar and a philosopher, and he walked the world learning of other people's and their knowledge. And he found out about Jesus, and he was fascinated with him. And for a couple of years, he also walked with Jesus and the disciples, watching them, listening and learning. But wasn't one of them, and he wasn't persecuted as one of them, and he went back and did his own thing, where he wrote the Gospel of Philip the Deacon of his time with Jesus. This book was found, or what remained of it, in Athens after they excavated the remnants of the Great Fire of Athens, and they found the most of the remains of the Gospel of Philip the Deacon, which you can now get as a printed book. And it contained a story that's probably the most important story to this age. And it is a giant, giant church secret. It is called the story of Rosa Mystica. And I came to the chapter in the book that told the story of Rosa Mystica. I began reading it. I suddenly realised something huge. As I realised it, again this is all straight out of a B movie, Spirit does this to you to make you look stupid. The room just flooded with white light, blinding me for a bit, just like the light bulb had gone super bright before blowing. And the room was overfull of white light, and I was certain I could see rainbows running down the sides of the walls. And rainbows in the corners. Rainbows are only curved, but they were like, edges had spectrums of rainbow, and rainbows were everywhere. And it caught my attention for a few seconds, and then something snapped me out of it. There was a little baby explosion in front of me. I looked down, the book I am reading had burst into flames. Absolutely real, as God is my witness, it just went woof. Now, I was sat in front of a gas fire, one of those old roller gas fires, but I had done for years, reading. That's what I used to do. I didn't have a telly, I just used to read. There was nothing unusual about where I was sat or how close I was to the fire, but suddenly, boom, the book's on fire. And I beat it out, it's not my book, I borrowed it, and I beat it out, and it's all burnt, all down one side, all down the, and oh no, how many pages are burnt, oh God. And I separated the burnt pages, and it was from the first page, chapter 1 of Rosa Mystica, to the last page of the story of Rosa Mystica, had completely caught fire and tried to destroy themselves, but nothing else in the book. Just the chapter I was reading had caught fire and really tried to burn out at a tremendous high speed. And I dabbed it out and I got it out. That made me very interested, because I'd not only had a thought that had suddenly filled the room with light, but just as I'd done so, the very thing that had given me the thought now on fire in front of me. So I start taking this rather seriously. Found out that not only was this story special and was in this book by Philip Deacon, but the other place you can read the story, and the only other place you can read the story, is by Frederick Bligh Bond, who channeled it through Cancerous Gwyllimus. Back where we started. So the same story, you can verify it yourself. Get hold of the books on Glastonbury Abbey, the early ones by Frederick Bligh Bond, and you'll come across the story of Rosa Mystica, or the book, The Gospel of Philip the Deacon, it tells the fuller version. Okay? As for what the story of Rosa Mystica is, I don't think I've got time left to tell it, because it is so important and I can't undertell it. Jenny, what have I got left?
So,
Do you want me to tell it?
I think they want you to tell it, yes.
Okay. I'll squeeze it down as quick as I can. Forgive me, so I'm going to have to condense this, okay? Alright. It's Friday evening. It's Jerusalem. It's 2,000 years ago. This afternoon, they nailed the Messiah to a cross on the hill. Only a little time has passed. We're now in the house of Joseph of Arimathea. Joseph's in there. He's with James. He's with Peter. And he's with John. These beings are in incredible, silent, guilt-ridden mourning, because they know how much they failed their master. God, this story is hard to tell. Okay. Joseph of Arimathea had done something very surreal during the execution of Jesus, at the risk to his own life. He had used a special bit of magic I call blatant invisibility. A term I invented, but something I've incurred throughout my life. Blatant invisibility. The ninjas use it. They can be in a room in full fancy dress, you won't see them. They're blatantly invisible. Joseph, using blatant invisibility, broke out of the crowd, made his way to the foot of the cross. He risked being killed for that, but he was in blatant invisibility. he had the cup with him that had been used, so-called, at the Last Supper. He took that cup now. A few of you are already familiar with the idea that he caught the blood of Jesus in this cup, etc., etc., and it became the Holy Grail and all that. Well, this is to try and make a whole story out of the beginning, because that was actually only the beginning. Because what he'd then done is he'd gone back into the crowd with the cup of blood and taken it back to his house, and nobody had paid any attention at all. Blatant invisibility, brilliant. A few hours later, we're in the house. Outside, there is unnatural blackness, there is the most outrageous holocaustic storm going on. All the veils and the linens of the town are being rent apart. There's missiles in the air. The streets are just wild dogs, missiles, torn cloths, and a few lost souls. Everybody else is off the streets in mourning, unnaturally in their houses. A whole city in guilt. There they are. They're in this room. Now, Joseph hadn't said anything to the others. But at this point, he knew what he had to do. And he broke away from the other three in mourning, and he went to his special table. Joseph had this beautiful olive table. He was a wealthy man. He had simple goods, but they were fine. And he had placed upon this olive table the cup containing the blood that he had captured the day before. And out of respect for it, he had gone to his game, fine, beautiful little cupboard, little carved cupboard, and he had got a sheet of damask, fine Egyptian see-through, beautiful cotton, the finest cotton. And he had covered the grail with this, covered the cup with this damask sheet. So here he is with the three beings, and they're in great mourning, and nobody can even look at each other. So Joseph goes over to the table, and he goes over and he lifts the veil. And this raises the curiosity of the other three, who are now a bit, what's he doing? Isn't that the cup that... And then this is the way with blatant invisibility. When it's pointed out to you, you did see it, but your brain hasn't told you you've seen it until you're reminded. And when they see the cup, they then remember seeing him go and get it. But that's how blatant invisibility works. So okay, they now know, oh hang on, that's the cup you took to the cross. Oh, therefore that's Jesus' blood in there. Oh, therefore, this is terribly sad. This is several hours old, congealed, going off. Bit not very nice really. But Joseph's there in fascination. So one of them, I'm not sure which, joins him. And is a gasp. So the other two come, and the four of them there. And when they're looking upon this cup, and where there should be that, as I described, congealed, rather sad resin, which was once blood, should have been. Instead, was this most fabulous coloured liquid that was red within red. It was magnificent, clear, beautiful, like a living jewel. Absolutely wonderful within the cup, this glowing, golden, beautiful red. And they look upon this red, and it is absolutely magnificent. And as they're looking upon it, there begins to be a movement of the air in the room. And it begins to twist and wind around them like a snake, and it's twisting and winding around them. But as it's twisting and winding around them, it is filling their nostrils with a scent the like of which they've never incurred before, and yet they know so well. And it is a scent that is the finest rose ever plucked. It is the scent of Jesus and his highest divinity. It is the scent of royalty. It is the scent of magnificence. And it's all encapsulated in one molecule in the nose. It's just magnificent scent. And at the same time, there begins a toning in the air, like several angels beginning to sing together. And this toning rises, and it becomes a chord. Shall we say the lost chord? So we have this fabulous tone, angelic tone. We have this magnificent scent going into their brains, filling their heads. Their eyes are filled with the vision of the red blood. And then it all settles down again, and there's just the red blood. And so Joseph very quickly takes the veil puts it back over the blood. So no sooner has he put the veil down, when they all sort of become really euphoric and start talking to each other frantically, did you see that, did you see that? And they're sort of like, had gone from being in mourning to complete elation. What timing, at that exact moment the door opens and in walks Mary Magdalene. Hard for me, this. Mary Magdalene was the most robbed woman ever. No one ever lost what Mary Magdalene lost. No one ever knew pain like that. So you can imagine her fury when she comes in and there are these beings who had not stood up for her man, had not helped him in his hour, partying as she comes through the door. She was bloody livid. And she waded into them. How dare you! You who failed my master! You dare to party! Joseph said, Mary, come. She came. He lifted the veil. She looked. She remembered him going to the cross. She knows what she's looking at. She looks again at it. Instead of this disgusting old dry blood, there's this beautiful liquid. She looks, they surround her. The air begins to move. Scent goes up their noses. The tone begins to raise. Magnificent. But this time, for the first time, because of Mary and for Mary, this time it goes further. As they look upon it, the cup begins to effervesce. It begins to give off a hue of rosy light. And this hue gets more and more intense. And it rises and it becomes tangible like dots, and you can begin to see it. And as they look upon it, it becomes as red petals of fire, and the petals become more intense and they grow and they begin to fill that space in the room. Until after a very short space of time, hanging magnificent, overlooking all of them, is the victorious Christ made of red petal fire, gazing down at them in his magnificence, red petal fire, and the room is filled with a white pink light of such beauty, such sensitivity, that it actually is sickly to the being, too much to take. And as they look upon this magnificence of the Christ, as impossibly as he arose, it resummons itself, it comes back into the cup, and there it is again, back in the red liquid. Joseph covers it with his cloth. Story's almost complete, but not quite. Joseph of Arimathea takes himself away from Mary and the other disciples, who are now laughing and cuddling and kissing and happy. Joseph's concerned, and he takes himself to one side and he prays to the Lord. He said, Lord, I do not know what I have seen. Tell me what I've seen. And a voice, we're not given who, Metatron, God, Archangel Michael, I don't know. But because of his stature, he is answered immediately, which is rare. And he is told, you have observed a phenomena called Rosa Mystica, the mystic rose. And he is told, when the words Rosa Mystica are on the lips of man, then I shall again be in the world. When the smell of Rosa Mystica is in the nostrils of man, shall again be in the world. When the sound of Rosa Mystica is in the ears of man, shall again be in the world. And Jesus broke from prayer and went to tell the others what he'd learned. They were incredibly elated. He then became even more concerned and thought, I don't know enough. he went back into prayer and said, Lord, this is wonderful, but this is a liquid, this is a volatile. You can't leave me with this charge. How do I deal with a liquid? Not in those words, but this is the essence of his prayer. And the Lord said, break from prayer and look again upon your cup. He broke from prayer. He went back to the cup. He removed the veil. Was it congealed blood? No. Was it the red within red wonderful liquid? No. It had changed again. And laying in the cup before him was a pink-stained white emerald. A beautiful, large, pink-tinted white emerald, like the light created when the rose petal Christ was in the room. And Joseph of Arimathea took that, placed it into his gold casket, and began a mission around the world with that, to take it to where, in a later prayer, he was told by Christ, by the Lord, or by whatever, where he had to take it. And he had to take it to this land whose name then meant England. But it did not come direct, it took a lot of years to get here. And it passed through several places that tried to keep it, and that got raised by it, and had their own stories of it. But it eventually found its way here, where it was hidden for at least 500 years in Glastonbury Abbey's treasury. Very convenient place for it, since it was full of relics from around the world anyway that were related to various things unknown to be. But nobody was allowed to know that this was there, and this was too big a secret. When things became threatened, that was one of the first things removed from the treasure. And it was not only removed from the Abbey for safety, it was removed from England for safety. And it was hidden back in the Garden of Gethsemane, where it belonged, where it came from, until the 1970s, when a gentleman who was the custodian of the garden, who had been privy to the secret because he was also a high-up member in several churches, was instructed to remove it and bring it to England. And it came to England in the 70s. In about 1987, I say about, it was exactly 1987, it re-emerged with a new guardian. And I say that this has been the course of my life because of the work I was doing, because of the secrets I'd uncovered and the things I was up to. I was sought out and made the guardian. And I tell you, I have it in here. Not possible, is it? Of course it isn't. How could I possibly be telling the truth? I say to you, how could I possibly stand here and lie? It's here. It's been here in my care since 1987. I've made an album about it, I'm waiting for it to come out, I'm writing a book about it, and I'm teaching about it. Because when the words are on the ear of man, here we go again. You want to see the pink tinted white emerald? The justification of this stone, it is also written again in the book by Philip the Deacon that the stone is identifiable because of two inclusions that cannot be in an emerald. In it are pieces of wood from the cross and iron from the nails, and they're both in there. Do you realise how lucky you are? There are so few people in the world know this story. You don't have to believe it. I'm talking to your ghosts. You can all go away and forget it and call me a crank. Your ghosts heard that story, and your ghosts know. My work's done here for tonight, but if you want to meet the stone, I won't be going for a few minutes. Love you all. Thank you very much.